Okay, I'm calling to order the March 10th meeting of the Ad Hoc Parking Committee. Apologize for the late start. We had technical difficulties. Can I just do a quick time check with everyone? Do we usually end right at 9, as close to 9 o'clock as possible? Do we need to do that today, or can we run a little overhead? Okay, that's fine.
To leave right at 9.
That's fine.
If it's okay, I'll just plan to get up and leave at 9.
That's fine, but
we'll a few more minutes to wrap it up.
We'll still try to.
Okay, just apologies in advance.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure before we start. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the April 26th minutes.
Yeah, I'm over here.
Okay.
Second.
So all approves, yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob, for taking those minutes. So now the items for us to discuss. I don't know if there's anything to say about the Park Mobile implementation at this point?
Yeah, I think so. Michelle participated in the meeting with them on our usual catch-up meeting with them on Friday. I had to leave early after the council meeting on Thursday night. So Michelle, if you could just report back to the group how that meeting went, please.
Sure. So the stickers and signage have been ordered. It's a 3-week turnaround, and they should have the configuration settings for us to connect Park Mobile with UP Safety for me this week. So I'll send that over. And we have a training with them at our next meeting to kind of go over the portal where we can change rates and see the financial information. So I expect probably by the next meeting we'll have a better date for start date.
So the start date's probably in June then.
Right.
Okay.
Are you sure? Yeah, because I mean, they told me that once the stickers were ordered, it'd be 3 weeks from that day to go live.
Mm-hmm.
So we might be looking at right around the end of the month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
soon.
Soon, but I don't think that anybody's saying, oh, you have to meet a specific date.
Sure.
Not at all. So I would say, whatever time you need to make sure it's going to work, right? Take that time if you do that. I was just asking June as sometime in June. A summer gift. Early summer.
As soon as we get it up, it'll be up.
Yeah. Okay. Super. Thank you so much for all that work you guys have done. Okay. The next item on the agenda is parking meters. We've had a memo from the Public Works about the parking meters that we have right now, which are analog and old, and parts are breaking and they're not always able to find replacements anymore. And so they're suggesting that we switch to digital meters. Samantha, would you like to say a little more about that?
Sure. Just to clarify a little bit, so like half the meters we have right now are the digital ones, and half the meters, give or take, are the analog ones.
That's right.
And so Public Works has been steadily cannibalizing them to keep them maintained. And at this point, I think we're out of extra meters. And so the proposal from our Public Works manager is to just have them all just be the digital ones. Even with the digital ones, well, I'll have to talk with the Public Works manager. I know the analog ones, we can't change the pricing or anything like that on them. I'll double check with them if we can or not on the digital ones. I wasn't clear about that. But his proposal is to go ahead and change out all. Sure.
I think I can answer the question on the piece in the memo. Additionally, the digital mechanisms have a lifespan of 10 years. About 50% have exceeded that lifespan but are functioning normally. These older digital mechanisms, while functional as they sit, cannot be reprogrammed with different rates or parameters. So I guess some of the digital ones can't be reprogrammed. Maybe some of them can. Way I would read that.
So we have a proposal from our Public Works manager to convert, all the meters to the digital ones. I believe the cost was around $7,000, $6,000 and change. He had also talked about doing a few every year, but we're not talking that much money. I'd rather just do it and be done with it, and then have some extras, especially if we do find any further opportunities to expand downtown parking that would be in metered areas that would have meters to then put in them.
Rob, any thoughts?
$7,000.
Give or take, yeah.
It's about 160 per mechanism and then $15 for a conversion kit to utilize the existing meter case. So it's,
And we did budget, in the borough budget this year, I believe we budgeted $3,000 for meter maintenance and replacement. So I would have to get permission from council to make a budget adjustment for the extra 4,000. But again, if this committee is willing to recommend in favor of that, then I would certainly recommend in favor of it.
I had a question. I was wondering, when we purchase new digital ones, can we get the ones that have the free 10 minutes?
So I asked Jeff about that. We can't because we don't want to, part of the goal is we want to have them all be consistent. And if Jeff and I felt like we'd be kind of back in the same problem if like some of them have the free 10 minutes and some of them don't.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Because not only are you restoring the meters, you're also kind of like preparing for a good meter maintenance setup going forward. And so you want to have all the same parts and the same.
Yeah,
So they're
trying to
easy to change
standardize
out and
them.
maintain.
And
Plus you'd have to drill a hole in the case for the little button.
that's a good point. You probably would need a new case, wouldn't you? You probably couldn't even, I don't know. That's a good point. I just know it's a very popular feature that people ask about all the time. And I thought, if we're purchasing something new, should we consider that? How many meters do we have? Because he's saying that for this purchase, it would be, if we did them all at once, it would be 65, but I'm assuming that's all replacing all the
Right.
ones that aren't.
Let's see, I'm trying to remember, because we had to put together a list for Park Mobile of all the parkings, all the metered spaces in the borough. Let's see here.
The button is a great thing.
I know.
Mhm.
That's so, I'm hesitant to just say, let's not, and move on without thinking about it just a little bit, because anytime you're replacing something, that's the opportunity, that's the time to take advantage of an opportunity like this.
Gives you a minute to get some change in or run in.
Well, yeah, if you're just,
A little bit of grace.
yeah, exactly, which, it makes it go down a little easier, so.
What I could do, I definitely do remember talking about that with the public works manager. I can have him maybe provide more of an explanations why that won't work. Again, I know the standardization was a big component of it. But we meet every 2 weeks. I could get him to give us a little more info on why we can or can't do that and talk about it more in 2 weeks.
Well, and the piece that I'd like to know is how many meters do we have in total? So if we decided to replace all 65 of the ones he's recommending right now at once, how many is left that then would need to be? And so, could we then say, well, all right, so with the 65, we'll get the ones with the buttons, and in the next year or the year after that, we'll replace all the rest of them, like budget ahead for that. And, so I realize that would mean that there would be a period of time where they're not standardized, but they're not standardized right now either. So
Just to go on about this a little longer, Lower Marion did the thing with the buttons over like 10 years ago before Park Mobile was even like on the horizon. We have Park Mobile on the horizon now. This is going to be like costlier. Put a little sand in the ointment. Like maybe we just go with, assume Jeff thought it through and is making the best possible recommendation at the best possible price. And we're in transition to Park Mobile anyway.
but we're not in transition to a cashless society yet, Bob. That's a long way down the road.
You think?
Yeah, I do. I really do. There's still a tremendous number of people who are not banked, who don't have a banking account, who don't have a credit card. It's amazing how many.
I guess we're the country that was supposed to go metric in the 70s too.
And we kind of live in a bubble here because most of the people that we may come in contact with, we just assume they have a bank account and a check and a credit card. But there's a lot of anyway, I just think it's worth exploring before we purchase something. I'm all about if we are going to replace something, let's be thoughtful. And because we're going to create a little trash when we replace these old ones, not that we don't have much choice because they're eventually going to break. But I would hate to see us buy something that we then, that a future public works group says, oh, let's buy all new ones with the pretend things. I'm just thinking that's my suggestion. So, and this isn't a time sensitive thing. It's not like we have to make a decision right away. So
It's like not like today time sensitive,
No,
but it's
it's soon.
kind of time.
and no, it's soon. I realize that, but we're meeting every 2 weeks, so we meet twice a month. So we can talk about this and make a decision that
All right,
Next
so
meeting.
we have,
you don't have. I wasn't asking you to answer that question right now. So.
okay, I'm like really close to the answer. It's like a sunk cost for me now. I'm waiting for one document to load.
Oh,
Is that a drum roll?
Not really.
Just it's internet.
It's punctuating my laugh. That's all. Yeah, I can't claim to be a drummer.
All right, we have,
Okay.
Yeah.
finally, the document's loaded.
I'm excited.
It's
I love it.
It's great.
17, 32,
It is.
17, 22.
We have a lot.
We have 178.
Okay, so this would replace not quite half, 40%. This purchase. Okay. But yeah, if you could just.
I'll talk to Jeff about it.
That would be great. Thank you. But we're not, help him understand, we're not trying to hold this up. We're just wanting to be thoughtful about our purchase. Okay. Moving on to the next item, the municipal parking lot draft ordinance. So we have a revised version that we hope now is final. It should be. It's gone through quite a bit of review. This is different from the version that was included in the March 17th business meeting packet of council that was put in there for consideration to advertise, but as you may remember, we tabled that because we realized, some of the changes that Solicitor Walco made in response to some just some comments that came in from us and the chief didn't really get at what we wanted, and we didn't get to see it as a committee before it went to council. So we tabled it because said, it needs to come back to us. So this version now addresses those concerns, and they were that the definition of abandoned vehicle was too broad. It was, it would essentially have said if you have someone come to your house because you're going away on vacation with them and they park their car on the street and so that you guys are taking your car to travel wherever and they're there for over 7 days, it's considered abandoned. And no, that's not what we mean by abandoned. So we wanted it to be more like what was in the existing police directive around abandoned vehicles. So that's been done. It doesn't exactly match the police directive. There's some things that are a little bit different. So that means that if council adopts this, the police directive will need some tweaks, but I think the chief and the mayor are aware of that. It also, this new version addresses the fact that we did not want a bike to be considered a vehicle. It was not trying to say it was, it just didn't exclude it. So we've got bikes and scooters. So, anything that's not exclusively gas powered is not considered a bike or a scooter that's not, it's solely gas powered would be considered a vehicle, but something that is not considered a vehicle. So none of these parking rules apply to that. And in looking at that, we realized that, it didn't include trailer under the definition of vehicle. And we really want that in there because we don't want somebody thinking they can park a trailer at, municipal lot or on the street and just leave it there forever. So The other thing that we addressed was, as we were looking into how you might be allowed to get a permit to park in a municipal lot long-term, we were saying that we wanted it to mesh with what we're suggesting for the residential parking program, which is that you have a vehicle registration that shows your current address, so in Narberth. And we realized, 201 Sabine is where we direct people to park a commercial vehicle that they use for work, that they're not allowed to park on the street because we have the restrictions of the really large commercial vehicles parking on the street. And that may be a vehicle that is not registered at a Narberth address. It could, let's say the person works for a company in Delaware and it's some big commercial vehicle of some kind and it's registered with that company. We still want that person, if they're driving it to work and they don't go to their location every day, they leave for their job site from their home, we want them to be able to park at 201 Sabine. So that added a little saying that at the discretion of the borough, either you have the registration card with a Narberth address on it, your current residence, or at the discretion of the borough, you provided some proof that make us say, oh, that's okay. We'll give you a permit to park in one of the municipal lots. Does that make sense?
Yeah, can you add to your notes for future that when those municipal lots are no longer available for oversized vehicles, that kind of parking that we're going to need to provide some kind of permit and have a designated area on the street
Oh, that's a good point.
for temporary overnight parking and like guest parking of oversized vehicles or something.
Well, I think that I don't know that that'll be the parking committees.
Just
at that point, we may not.
Anyway.
That may be way down the road, but that's a good point. But I think that would be any current use of any municipal property. If that's changed, you'd have to consider how you handle the current uses of it. But that's a good point, Bob. I just think that's a ways down the road. This committee may not be.
I added it to my notes
That's
because it is a good point.
yes, it is.
It'll come up anyway naturally.
That's what I think. But yes, you're right to point out that we will make sure that there's still that, that there's some availability for parking. So those are the main changes. There were other ones too that just, cleaned up some things and a better definition of a wrecked vehicle and some things like that Solicitor Walpo suggested that made a lot of sense. So I just wanted to see if Bob or Rob, you had any comments on this. If not, it's going to go to council to consider for advertisement at next Thursday's meeting. And then we'd be in a position to vote on it. Yes, would it be at our business meeting in June or?
Yeah.
So, and then we can talk about the parking program and want to put it in place for the municipal lots. Because this doesn't lay out the actual parking program, it just says that the borough may, set up a parking program. Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, so residential parking. And, as we know, we had a robust discussion, I would say, of parking at council's meeting last Thursday night. And I was really pleased that there was so much engagement around this, given that parking can be kind of boring, and yet it has such an impact. So I thought that was a really good discussion, and there are a number of things that I think we need to respond to that council members raised. But before we did that, I thought maybe we should give Michelle a chance to talk to us about her suggested way, a rollout of a change in the program might work, so that we can kind of put that to bed in a sense, and then we have that in mind as we talk through the rest of the questions.
Yes, so I created the memo and I included a map because it's easier for me to visualize how it would look in the different groups, I've called them, although it could be areas. I was just trying to stay away from zones, that word, just to make it, if it is decided that the parking permits will go by streets, I don't want it to be an assumption that if you're in zone 1, that you're eligible to park anywhere in zone 1. So I set it up, I went through the list and I found that it was there's basically about 14 blocks per group. I mean, it seemed pretty even when you look at the lengths. And then I had 3 annual expiration dates, and I wanted to make clear that someone applying for, say, group 1 permit that expires in January, if they apply for it in October, they don't get a full year. It always will expire on that expiration date. And I think that spreading them out into different groups will allow us to get better customer service and be able to the office handle those expirations a little bit better. But I'd love to kind of give the word that, you can apply online. So push everyone to a website. It's automatic. This is what you need. It's sort of like a form. You fill out the information, you upload your file, and then you receive the permit instantly.
I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it, because I didn't realize that it didn't get to you until late yesterday. So.
No, I looked at it and I thought I liked the rationalization of it. Interesting that the 3 groups have 3 colors. It just sort of reminded me of the conversation the council would want us to have about Nelson Nygaard recommendation of 3 areas rather than individual blocks. The way we decided, the way Michelle set it up, but it lends itself naturally to kind of like 3 groups, perhaps.
Sort of, not the Nelson Nygaard ones, but
No, they're not the Nelson Nygaards, but the point of their recommendation was to simplify. I don't know. I don't know that these groupings would work, but you do see that the distribution of all of the current existing regulated parking does naturally kind of divide up into 3 groups. Anyway, I thought it was good work and it makes sense to me, and especially if we go with regulating the streets the way we talked about them, groups according to street name.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
I'm bringing it up now.
And it also limits the time that the office has processing these to 3 months rather than 12 months of the year.
3 different clumps.
Yeah.
So
3 months,
three
months
so.
rather than all year long.
So I had a question. So we've talked about how if we still go ahead with we want to put into place a new program for the currently regulated streets, and then a few months later somehow expand that to some or all of the rest of the borough. And we're hoping that we only need a few months of experience with the phase 1, I'll call it, to help us know whether there's anything that needs to be changed before we go ahead and do phase 2. And so if I look at this, I think that what that means is if we still want that few months gap, that would mean that we would only have had one of the groups in place under the new system with the license plate reader and all of that kind of stuff. If we're saying that we're going to stagger the sign-up periods for these 3 groups. Am I interpreting that correctly?
I think if I understand what you mean, so if we do phase 2 shortly after January, after the first group gets their permit, then we won't see the rest of them.
We won't have had experience with all of the people who currently have regulated streets. We won't know whether there are issues. Let's say I'd like say group A, B, and C. And let's say group A is the January 1st folks that have to get their permit requested. And for some reason, they don't have an issue that then shows up in group B. And we don't see that for 3 months because we're not doing them all at once. I'm not saying that that's a problem. I just want to make sure that I understand that our data set to help us know whether there's anything that we might want to tweak before we go ahead and do the full rollout. If we're doing any kind of a full rollout, we won't have as big a data set as we might if we waited until everyone who's in a currently regulated area was under the new program. I'm not saying it's bad or good. I just want to make sure that I understand that's what the result would be, so that we can say, yeah, we're okay with that.
I would say yes, and what I would offer as maybe a way to address that is maybe the first permits we ever issue, like again, I think we tell it for, as I said 2 weeks ago, I'm making up dates here. All right, let's say that we got to a place where council approved an ordinance in like August or September. Maybe what I would offer is that we would still do the 3-month thing, but maybe they wouldn't have to then immediately renew at the beginning of the next year. Maybe the first permits would be good until the beginning of 2024 instead of 2023. And that way, so let's say September 1, again, making up dates for those of you watching at home. September 1 was group 1, October 1 was group 2, November 1 was group 3. Those 3 groups wouldn't then have to renew again Jan 1, Feb 1, March 1. It would be the following year. So we could go ahead and start getting a rollout underway without making people pay for, a permit twice in like 4 months.
Okay, so you just said something that I'm like, oh, maybe I misinterpreted this memo. I thought what this was suggesting is that the enrollment and effective date, when it would first be effective for each group would be January 1st and then May 1st and then September 1st. So in my mind, that means we have group A would be under the new program from January 1st through May 1st. And then starting May 1st, we'd add in group B. And then starting September 1st, we'd add in group C. So we wouldn't have everybody in until September 1st.
Gotcha.
And I think you just said, no, you would enroll group A September 1st, and then group B, October 1st, and group C, November 1st. And I did not interpret this memo that way, but that's maybe how
That's how I read it too, so that it would all be done within a quarter of a year.
Is that
maybe I misremembered that part of, and if I did, that's fine. I think you could still apply the same approach where maybe just in the first start off, we just have to deal with 3 months in a row. And again, they'd be, well, I don't know about group 3 in that case, because they would basically get a full year, give or take, until October 1. This designation we're making up of like group A, however, I think should not have to immediately renew again. Fan one. So I don't know, maybe.
Well, and I think that's a separate issue.
But there's sort of 2 things here. One is how the phase in.
Yeah.
And which I assumed was going to happen all the way in a quarter of a year, 3 months.
I'm sorry, but I didn't get that from.
And then the second thing you're saying is that it may make sense. I thought you were just sort of creating a new idea, which is it may make sense then to extend the permits for a whole additional year beyond the enrollment date, which I think makes a lot of sense, just so that to simplify the second year, especially if there's going to be any additional permitting beyond those districts.
Now, my fear a little bit about doing that is people have gotten so used to not having to do annual renewal.
That's true.
Is I don't want people to think that's still going to be the case and then suddenly be surprised at the beginning of 2024 when they're having to renew their permit.
Well,
So I guess the question I'd ask is, I mean, how urgent is it that we get it expanded from phase 1 to phase 2? I mean, if we were willing to say willing to wait a year before considering a phase 2, then the problem solves itself.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was particularly important for us to not wait, but then when I listened to the conversation among council, I thought that they were sort of saying, look, this is going to be equitable. We have to like move this throughout the entire borough.
That was, I think, Michelle,
Yeah.
kind of point that people will move from one area to another to take it, you know, unless this is done in quick succession, it would be inequitable.
So I think we have to decide whether we agree with that or not. And if we do agree with that, I think, which I'm not necessarily saying I do, but if we do agree with that, the solution I would offer is we just don't wait to do a phase 1 or phase 2, we just do it all at once. I think that would be less painful than now we're actually trying to sort out how the rollout would work. It just seems like it'd be better just to do it all at once then if we're going to do it.
Yeah, the chairperson Fortner, this is like the moment when we wonder if we should start discussing, like if we're going to do it all at once, then we really should take under consideration the council suggestion that we reconsider the Nelson R3 zones.
well,
Because
but,
that would be easier to phase in all at once.
but can so
Absolutely.
I'm happy to switch that. Can I just make sure that, so I want to reframe really quickly how the rollout would work to make sure I'm now understanding it. Because I
misspoke when I first started. Your interpretation is correct. I misremembered on that one.
I don't know about that. So because when I read the memo, I thought it was saying that the staggering would match with the expiration dates of the parking permits.
My suggestion was not that everyone has to apply during their time for just that year. It was that each group would expire at the same time each year. So January to January, May to May, October to October. So then it really separates when they're applying for it each year, and then they get that full year.
Right. Right. So then, but the initial rollout is where I have a question there, and I think that's where I was like, yeah. So with the initial rollout, the very first time we put this into place, Group A would enroll in month 1, Group B would enroll in month 2, and Group C would enroll in month 3. Do you think that's doable? Because that's like doing a lot of people in each month, potentially in fact, in each month. And is that what you were thinking, or were you thinking it needs to be spread out over more time?
Well, Michelle has January, May, September, right?
Well, and this is where I'm trying to understand. To me, that's saying that Group A would enroll, like in December. Group B would not enroll until April, and Group C wouldn't enroll until August, the very first time. And I'm trying to understand when we do this initially, what you're suggesting. That makes sense.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, my only concern and the reason why I separated them out so much is that, if this was approved and decided by council and then we advertise it for like 3 months, so you have 3 months to get that first permit. But that's going to be an overwhelming amount of people calling, what do I do? I've never done this. How does this work? So I was just trying to separate it over time because we'll always, when we saw this every time we stopped enforcing 2-hour zones and then we started enforcing them again.
Yeah.
We saw there was a lot of questions and confusion, although we had a lot of information out there. It's going to be a lot if we have everyone apply at once.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
So I think we are saying the rollout is going to be a 9-month period, not a 3-month period. That's the thing that I'm trying to make sure we're all.
Yeah, that's what I misspoke about, yeah.
Okay, because that's what I wanted to make sure we're on the same page about.
In that case, there's 2 things. Could we then just call the permit, it's a 12-month permit, and the renewal date is 12 months after the sign up? So if a person signs up on the first month, like the first day of the offer, they have 12 months. And if the person signs up on the 15th day, they have 12 months. Is that, so everyone will have a different renewal date? Or
Yeah, I feel
are
like-
you hoping to have it be like an annual permit with the year stamp?
So I think that, just from my perspective, and I welcome Michelle's, I just think that if everyone in the borough has a completely different renewal date, that's gonna be like a whole thing to keep track of for us. I don't know.
I'm not sure if our system can do that, because I know we can have,
Okay, so then that's a no. Like, okay, so it's got to be annualized.
right, so the permit that we create will have an expiration date. So if we're doing them by streets, we'll have to separate them by this street, and then this is the expiration date. So I don't think you can go in individually and say, oh, you have an exact year.
Yeah, just to the manager's earlier point about like, well, so when do these, like what's the term of someone who applies in September?
See, and can I offer a suggestion? We don't know yet when we might actually be in a place to start the rollout. So why don't we defer that question till we know that? Because it maybe we'll be able to set things up in a way that it, works nicely with, hey, it's a calendar year, we're just gonna wait until, whatever, but we don't know yet.
By
So
the same
too
token,
soon.
maybe just the rollout of these initial currently regulated zones is enough for now. And then we maybe push back on the notion of regulating the whole borough shortly after, because we maybe give it some time to see how it works.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of what I was hinting at. I mean, with all due respect to the opinions of council members, in the terms of government, like a year doesn't seem that long to me.
Mhm.
I think would be willing to commit that after a year, we could examine that. Or if it turns out to be this like gigantic problem immediately, we could go ahead and add certain blocks to the existing, to the existing routes.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there are ways we can handle it if that does become a problem that doesn't require us to completely jumble up the the rollout to do it.
Yeah. You'll be putting, in terms of like creating, following on this current initiative with a coherent plan. You probably will have different people in the room then. So you're going to be taking on a lot for yourself to be the sole thread of continuity. Whereas if we like do it all now, like kind of as one initiative, like and set it up for however you have you have kind of continuity, maybe you have continuity now.
True.
So it's just like, you might get another group who just say like, look, let's undo the whole thing and you'll be back to square one.
well,
If you're.
but that's why I think we do need to think about what the next phase would be. We maybe don't.
That's what I'm saying, is that like, I'm just saying like, we need to pause and think about, I was basically asking the manager to think on that, like.
Yeah, so one thing is, I mean, it seems like Michelle's proposing the staggered start for reasons of workflow in the office, which makes a lot of sense. Can we use our parking? I don't know if we can, is it worth like hiring someone part-time to man the phones? Because I can imagine that's a ton of hours. And that could make it possible to do it all at once and be done with it. Or could our parking ambassadors be pulled into this work as well? I don't know, it's just a question.
So something I'd envisioned, I haven't had a chance to talk with the chief, because I know he's still working on the position description for the civilian employee for the police department, but I had somewhat envisioned that person, helping out with these sort of things. So that's something I haven't had a chance to talk in detail with the chief about.
Mm-hmm. I just think, if it's overly complicated to do it in a staggered way, we could just do it all at once.
Yeah. Yes.
While being sensitive to the burden on the staff, it should be temporary.
Okay. So I think, at least that, now I feel like, okay, now I understand the memo more, and so I feel more like, okay, I get it. And it surfaced, I think, some questions for us still that I don't think we're gonna be able to answer right now, which is fine, but it's, so we'll keep it on our list of questions. It's like, as we get closer and know more, how do we leverage? I did have one question about your map, and that was just, I was just like, okay, so I think I'm correct. You didn't try to identify the specific blocks that currently have regulated, that are currently regulated, because some of the streets I know have, like Rob, is the street you live on has some blocks are regulated and some blocks aren't. And so I just was like, okay, I think this was more to help us visualize, but not to say, oh, this is the.
It should be pretty accurate because I took the public works data and then I Google Maps and I said, okay, 200 right here and here. So it should be pretty accurate, and may have one line maybe a little longer, but I did go by streets.
Okay, because it just looked to me like all of Marion Avenue was highlighted as being 2 hour, having regulations on it. I don't think that's right.
No, it's not. It's only 200.
Oh, jeez, all right, I'm off one. See, this is what happens when you print it out and you don't remember exactly how to say it.
That's a hypothetical question.
Yeah.
It's out of
My
order.
apologies.
If the question's out of order, like just say like, look, let's just put this off till later. But Michelle, if the council were to decide to just do 3 groups, the way according to the Nelson Nygaard, like south side, sort of southern part of north side and northern part of north side, like in that way, is it easy for you to reshuffle these and recolor code them?
Could you, yes, and I think you're gonna have most people in one group here and one group here, because one of the zones, it picks up I just don't know that it's gonna evenly divide.
Well, it depends on how I don't necessarily, like, it depends on how you draw that zone.
Exactly.
We could ask Michelle to draw the zone based on the north side zone, based on like sort of how the distribution of current regulations.
Yes, so I just wanted to point out, I don't know that the Nelson Nygaard zones would evenly split up. I guess what Michelle was trying to do was to
evenly split the currently regulated streets.
Exactly.
But we don't have to go literally.
Right. I just want
to say we're using the idea of 3.
Right.
Yes, so I would say as well, and I welcome any thoughts Michelle has. Thinking on what what Michelle Canopoulos said on Thursday night, and hearing, thinking on it over the past few days and hearing this discussion about how we're going to have people theoretically register under 3 different groups. Anyhow, I'm willing to maybe rethink my past opposition to the 3 zone idea. And maybe, I hate to have us backtrack here on our conversation, but maybe, consider talking about that idea again.
Well, and that was what I thought our next conversation should be, and we can start it. I don't know if we'll get it finished today, but we can start if that makes sense to everybody.
I was rethinking it too and trying to reinvent the reasons why we jettisoned it.
Can I?
Maybe you remember.
I'm not 100% sure I remember, but so what I did was I went back to their report because I thought, all right, I need to see what did they actually say. And what I remembered was they weren't really creating the zones for any other reason but to have different enforcement hours for the zones. They were not suggesting that, this zone have 2 hour parking and this zone have, let's just make it up because they didn't include it, an overnight parking permit required. That's not what they were doing. They were really doing this to address what they thought the enforcement hours should be. And what they were suggesting was Zone 1, which they defined as south of the railroad tracks, should be enforced 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day of the week. Zone 2, which is north of the tracks up to Stewart/Woodbine, would also be regulated 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. And then Zone 3, which is north of Zone 2, so the farther reaches of the borough, would be enforced noon to midnight, 7 days a week. And And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's nice, but they're not even suggesting any parking restrictions in zone 3. They don't make any suggestions that you would do anything like that. What they were saying is they would overlay these zones on top of our current regulated streets. And if residents petitioned to have their block added to become a regulated street, then you would do that.
Or opted out.
Well, I guess they could do that. They didn't cover that, but yes, they could, I guess we could consider that.
It's never happened.
And what we had talked about from the very beginning is that we were trying to not create more 2-hour zones because that causes a lot of confusion about where you can park. It makes it more complicated that was what we were understanding. It makes it more complicated to enforce and administer. And so we were thinking we would get away from that. That's why we didn't want to do zones. We were thinking, let's just stay with our currently regulated, where the 2-hour currently regulated zones are, because those are the ones where there have been problems with daytime parking. I mean, that's really, is the underlying issue there is that there's a lot of competition for those spaces during the day that then sometimes cause overnight problems because a person comes home from work and can't find a space in their block because there's a person still there from, going to the train or something for the day. So we looked at then what's the issue with the rest of the borough? And we said, well, the issues with the rest of the borough are things like we have a lot of people that have underutilized driveways. We have cars that are used infrequently, if at all, parked on the streets. We have people coming from outside the borough and parking for extended periods of time while they go away on vacation because they know their car is safe. We have fully parked streets that lead to problems for drivers and pedestrians because you can't see very well. And so we wanted to do something to incentivize a decrease in the number of cars parked on the street. And that's where the overnight parking idea came from. So we're certainly, we can revisit all of this. That's not a problem. I just wanted us to remember how we got to where we were. And I think I've got that right. Everybody correct me if I feel like I misstated something there. I'm sure that's how we got to this.
Yeah, it sounds right. I can't remember why it seemed like such
Well, maybe I was just in like a bad mood that day.
No, I don't think you were the only one though, because I remember thinking I really had something caught in my craw about it. And and I almost have to go back. I have to keep thinking. I think we have to keep discussing for a little bit.
I think part of what you were concerned about was, so this was one of the other things that they said. Let's see. Resident permits should be linked to one of 3 distinct zones, not individual streets. That was their suggestion. Not that we have to take it, but that was their suggestion. Permits should not be designated for a specific street. That instead it should be this whole zone. And our concern was, so somebody who's has a 2-hour, is in zone 2 and has, a 2-hour whatever, might, come all the way down here and park down here with their sticker in a 2-hour spot, so they have a shorter walk to the train. And we didn't want to do that to the people.
I think you were concerned about the border zone.
You were.
And in fact, because I think I'm remembering back to a meeting where there were a lot of people in the room, there was a lot of upset, and that was what was happening. And it was like on Dudley, where for some reason someone was commuting down from the top of Dudley to the bottom of Dudley to park near the train, and then their neighbors were really upset because their car was in front of their house. It was and there were a lot of people upset about the whole thing. It didn't seem fair.
Yeah, and I can say that is I know that's a real world thing because I have a neighbor who had hip replacement, and she could not walk all the way from my area to the train. But she could walk from Windsor to the train, so she would drive up to a block where she could, and then walk the rest of the way. And her work hours were such that she was not needing to be at the train station when there were still spaces in the parking lot. You know, they were all gone by the time she needed to be taking the train. And so she had to do something. That's why she was doing that. But do we want to say, oh, if you have, you know, if you're in the further reaches of zone 2 in a 2-hour zone place and you've got a 2-hour zone permit doing that, I want you to be able to park in another 2-hour zone spot in zone 2. That's the question.
Well, and if we change it to streets, would we still have that problem?
Yes, you do. Yep, that's true. If we do it by street.
Still have that
We still have
problem,
that
right?
problem.
You could still be at the
Exact
top
same
of
what you
it.
said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could.
Right, still
Yeah.
the same problem. It
It
doesn't
is still the
solve it.
same problem.
And-
It's just, you may be
and then-
opening it to more, because now
And
it
then-
isn't the, you know, streets going this way, it's the streets going this way, that too, that can be moved down.
And then just as a thought puzzle or thought experiment, let's say you don't have any zones, you don't have any groups, you just have a normal permit. And you give every resident the privilege, if they purchase a permit, of parking in any 2-hour zone. And what would happen then?
Oh, gosh.
You know, would it sort itself out, or would you have chaos?
No, I think you'd have people choosing to park in 2-hour zones that would then mean that some folks wouldn't be able to park in front of their house anymore.
Okay.
I really do. I think you'd end up having overparked.
And that's
The 2-hour
probably
zones
why
that are closer to the business.
And that's why most municipalities create the groups.
Yeah.
To separate it.
Well,
Just
create some regulations.
to create distinct precincts where people can and cannot be.
Yeah.
They have them. Just to take it to the other extreme.
Right, yeah, if you took it all away, then really, yeah. You're allowing for tremendous demand in an area where the supply is not tremendous.
So, and then currently, I have to go in a second, I'm sorry. But currently, are we like doing it by the 100 blocks?
We are.
Okay. So it's really constrained now.
What do you mean by that?
Like,
Oh,
well,
yes, you're block by block, yes. Mhm.
And just-
Yes, and so we were.
Does it work?
Well, the challenge with that, in my opinion, is we talked about before, you know, due to demographic changes in a block, you have a block where, you know, someone recently has kids who now can drive.
That's right.
And suddenly no one can park there. And then maybe just one block over, kids have moved away and people only have one car per house now.
I remember that conversation. It's like, then you have a 4-car family.
Yeah.
It's like the
And that's-
inconveniences the rest of the block for about a generation.
And that's how I think we end up on, given that none of the 3 options seem to be a clear-cut winner, I think that's how we ended up on the
Yeah.
I think so too.
street option. Because-
That still doesn't make sense.
Yes,
Because of how it works socially, neighbors know each other, you know your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Kind of like, unless they're being really obtuse, like, you know, like, we're gonna park wherever we want without any regard for their neighbors.
Yeah.
Which is unlikely, I think, that's unlikely.
it's just my final point for this morning, and happy for anything else anyone else wants to say. It's just, if we are talking, the biggest thing that's moved me towards reconsidering the 3-hour zones is if we're talking about the renewal being in 3 groups anyway, then my thought is, well, why not just do the zones at that point? Because that was my other big hang up on it, was how's the registration for it going to work? But if we're basically doing the registration that way anyway, then
Michelle, could you take a look at you know, if the Nelson Nygaard zones would divide your map up in a way that feels equitable to you in terms of the amount of time it would take? And if not, just let us know, and then we'll know, well, if we want to use 3 zones like Nelson Nygaard, we might need to change the boundaries on it to make it line up a little more with our currently regulated streets, but I think that'll just help us know what we're talking about.
My apologies.
It's okay, Rob.
Bye, everybody.
So, We obviously still have a lot to talk about. How we want to do this, which, is in some ways not a surprise because, we spent a lot of time talking about this to get to where we were. So it's not a surprise that council would still have some questions for us that kind of are reminiscent of what we already talked about. So I'm just going to suggest that we pick this up in 2 weeks where we are, if that makes sense. And we'll continue to work through then some of the other questions that council had. Why did we want to regulate overnight parking in the first place? And, I think we need to talk about that again and the concerns that the mayor raised. Need to talk about this question of what does it mean to have a driveway. I think we talked about shared driveways at one place, but we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. So I think we need to get back to that. And then this whole idea of are we doing it all at once or in 2 phases, or if we're going to roll out to more of the borough than what we have currently, and what's the appropriate fee? Do we want to suggest a different base rate? Do we want to consider having any initial permit at no cost if you don't have any off-street parking at all? So just some of those kind of things. That's what I have written down as issues that came up at the table last week. And so if anybody thinks of anything else, let me know. I don't think we have anybody on Zoom for public comment. No.
Our next meeting is May 24th. So
Yes.
8 a.m.
8 a.m. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to adjourn our meeting then. Thank you, everybody.